They say monsters live under the bed. Mine lived down the hall. Wore my mama's bloodline like a badge. Smelled like tobacco, gasoline, and power. He didn't need to raise a fist to break me. Just a look. A key turned in a lock. And silence. The kind that sticks to your ribs. Family's supposed to protect you. But mine handed me over like a debt owed. And I've carried that debt my whole life, in my bones, in my boy's last name, in the stories I never told. Hi, I'm Margaret Elaine Price. I'm 76 years old. And this is the first time I've ever said it all out loud. Not even my daughter knows everything, but maybe she will now. Maybe you will too. Welcome to Whispers and Wills. If you're here, thank you. Please like, share, and subscribe. It means the world. And before we begin, where are you from? Tell me in the comments. I like knowing who's out there. I was 14 the first time he locked the door. 1971, in a house off Route 3 in western Georgia. My mother was gone, not dead, just done. And Daddy had taken to drinking and forgetting my name. But it wasn't Daddy. It was Uncle Ray, my mother's younger brother. He came to help out after she left. Said a girl needed a man to teach her right from wrong. Said I was too pretty to be walking around the house like that. I thought I could disappear if I stayed quiet enough. I thought if I folded my voice small, he'd forget I was there. But I was wrong. That winter felt like it never ended. The trees died slow. My body changed without asking permission. I bled and cried and no one came. At night, I'd whisper to myself, "You're just a story. You're not real." But I was real. And he made sure I never forgot that. In 1972, I got pregnant. Didn't know until my belly started to round under my church dress. Uncle Ray said I was a liar. Said I must have gone with some boy from school, but I hadn't. I didn't even know how. He drove me 2 towns over to a clinic that turned us away. Too far along, they said. He didn't speak the whole ride back. Just gripped the steering wheel like it was the last thing keeping him from killing me. I gave birth in the back bedroom with a neighbor woman catching the baby. She asked no questions. Folks back then were good at pretending nothing happened. Especially to girls like me. He was a boy. I named him Eli. It means ascended. I needed something holy in that house. Uncle Ray told everyone Eli was his. Said his wife had died in childbirth. Folks believed him. It made things easier. I stayed until I was 17. Waited until Ray was passed out drunk with the TV on. I wrapped Eli in a quilt and took the bus to Alabama. I never went back. That's enough for today. Next week, I'll tell you about the woman who let us sleep on her porch for 3 nights and how a bus ticket and a waitress job kept us alive. If you're still here, thank you for listening. This isn't easy, but maybe someone out there needs to hear it. Tell me where you're listening from. And if you believe in second lives, you might like this story. Until next time, stay gentle. The bus took us as far as Birmingham. It was a night ride. The kind where the windows rattle and nobody speaks unless they're desperate. I had $17 in a worn-out wallet. And Eli, wrapped in the same quilt I was born under. He was 2 years old and already too quiet. Already learning the rules of survival. Don't cry. Don't look at men too long. And don't ask your mama where your daddy is. I didn't know anyone in Alabama. Just picked it off the map like pulling names from a jar. Somewhere my face wouldn't be recognized. Somewhere Ray wouldn't come looking. Somewhere with space to breathe. We stepped off the Greyhound just after sunrise. I asked a man in a cap where the nearest church was. He pointed, grunted, and walked off. That's where I met her. Miss Lillian. She had soft eyes and strong hands. The kind of woman who didn't flinch when life looked ugly. She caught sight of us sitting on the church steps, offered a biscuit and some sweet tea. Didn't ask who I was. Didn't ask what I was running from. I told her we were just passing through. She said, "Well then, you'll need a place to pass through, won't you?" She let us sleep on her porch, 3 nights under the same tin roof she was born beneath. Handed me a blanket. told me not to worry about the raccoons. I cried the second night. Not because I was scared, but because I wasn't. In 1974, I got a job at a diner off the highway. Red apron, short sleeves, bruises still yellow on my arms. The owner, Mr. Calvin, hired me without asking for references. I think he saw it in my eyes, the need. Or maybe he just needed someone to refill coffee and smile. I did both. For 12 hours a day, while Miss Lillian watched Eli in the mornings. That year, I saved every tip I made in a cookie tin under the bed. Pennies and quarters. Dollar bills folded twice. Eli got stronger. So did I. People say it's the big things that make you who you are. But I think it's smaller than that. It's 3 nights on a stranger's porch. A hot biscuit. A clean apron. A quiet room where no one touches you in your sleep. Miss Lillian died in 1980. She left me her porch swing. And her Bible, with notes in the margins and prayers tucked between the pages. I still have it. Thank you for being here. Next time, I'll tell you how Eli started calling me Mama instead of Margie, and the day I told my first lie to protect him. Not the last, but the first. Please like, share, and subscribe if this story matters to you. I'm not here for fame, just to finish what I started. Until next time, stay gentle. By the time Eli turned 3, he had stopped calling me Margie. It happened one morning while I was buttoning his coat on the porch. He looked up at me with those serious eyes, the same shape as Ray's but softer somehow, and said, Mama. Just like that. Like he'd always known. My hands trembled on the buttons. I didn't correct him. I just pulled the coat tight around his small body and said, Yes, baby. Mama's right here. And from then on, that was who I became. I never told him the truth. Never told him that I was just a girl when he came into this world, that I had never asked to be a mother but became one out of survival. He didn't need that burden. Children don't need the weight of their mother's pain, not when they're still learning how to carry their own name. So I gave him a story. I told him his father had died in a car accident before he was born. I made it clean, gentle, the kind of lie you polish until it sounds like mercy. In 1976, I found a small duplex with peeling paint and creaky steps. It wasn't much, but it was ours. I worked mornings at the diner and cleaned houses in the afternoons. On Sundays, Eli and I would sit on the back steps and eat peanut butter sandwiches, watching the neighbors' chickens strut through the grass like they owned the place. He'd laugh and tell me which one was the boss. I'd laugh too, even when my heart was heavy. There were nights I'd wake up in cold sweat, certain I'd hear Ray's truck outside. My breath would catch in my throat, but it was always just wind or a dog or the weight of memory. Still, I kept a baseball bat under the bed, just in case. Trauma makes you cautious, and I had a child to protect now. He started school in 1978. I remember the way he gripped my hand at the classroom door, the fear in his eyes. I smiled, kissed the top of his head, and told him he was brave. I told him he was wanted. The things I wish someone had told me. That year, he drew a picture of our little house with a sun and a stick figure woman in a red dress. He gave it to me and said, That's you, Mama. You always bring light. I cried that night, not from sorrow, but something else. Maybe hope. Next time, I'll tell you about the man who almost ruined everything, and how I learned that even when the past tries to come knocking, you don't always have to open the door. If this story stays with you, please like, share, and subscribe. And thank you for letting me be heard. Until next time, stay gentle. His name was Glenn, though I didn't know that at first. He was just the man at table 9, the quiet one who ordered black coffee and read the paper front to back like he was searching for something that might bring him peace. He came in every Tuesday and Thursday without fail. Always alone. Always polite. He was the kind of man who looked you in the eye when he said thank you. That mattered to me back then. Still does. I didn't trust men. Not even the decent ones. Especially the decent ones. Because sometimes they're the ones who break you slow, with kindness, with patience, with promises they don't know how to keep. But Glenn was different, or at least he seemed to be. He never touched me, never lingered too long. He spoke in low, measured tones, like he didn't want to startle the air. After a few months, he started leaving little notes under his coffee cup. Just simple things. Hope your day's kind. You deserve rest too. You make a hard job look graceful. I didn't know what to do with that. I wasn't used to being seen in a way that didn't feel dangerous. So I ignored him for a while. Kept my head down. Focused on Eli. But one day, when I was sweeping the floor near closing time, he asked me if I liked music. I froze. He smiled gently and said he had 2 tickets to a concert in the park, no pressure. Said I could bring my son if I wanted. Just an evening. Just music. Against every instinct in my body, I said yes. That Saturday, I put on the only dress I owned that didn't smell like grease. Eli held my hand as we walked through the park, the grass soft beneath our feet, music floating from the stage like something from a kinder world. Glenn didn't try to hold my hand. He didn't even sit too close. He just passed Eli a cup of lemonade and said, "He's got your eyes." That was all. And in that moment, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Safety. Not the illusion of it, the real thing. We saw him a few more times after that. Picnics. Library visits. Quiet walks. Glenn was slow and steady, like river water. But part of me never stopped bracing for the flood. So when he asked me, 6 months later, if I'd consider letting him stay, not move in, just stay more often, I told him no. I told him I had a son to think about. What I didn't tell him was that I still heard Ray's voice in my sleep, that I still didn't know how to be touched without flinching, that I didn't know if I'd ever stop looking over my shoulder. He nodded, didn't get angry, just kissed Eli's head, told me I was brave, and left me standing in the doorway with my heart in my throat. I never saw him again. Next time, I'll tell you about the fire. Not the kind that burns buildings, the kind that burns inside. The kind that leaves scars you can't see but carry everywhere you go. If this story touches something in you, please like, share, and subscribe. Every listener, every word shared, it helps me keep going. Until next time, stay gentle. The fire started in my chest. Quiet at first, like a simmering pot you forget is on the stove. I didn't notice it until I began snapping at Eli for small things. A misplaced toy, a spilled glass of milk. Things a mother should forgive with a smile, or at least a sigh. But I wasn't smiling. I was breaking. It was 1981. Eli was 7, and he had started asking questions. About where we came from. About why we didn't have pictures of his daddy. I'd prepared for this moment in theory, but not in practice. I had no script, just the lie I'd shaped from silence years before. So I told him again. His father died before he was born. A car wreck. Quick. Painless. He nodded, wide-eyed and quiet, and I thought that would be the end of it. But children don't let go like that. They come back to things. They circle the cracks, even if they don't know what they're looking for. A week later, he brought home a drawing from school. It was of a grave. A stick figure crying next to it. "This is me," he said. "And that's where my daddy is." I stared at the page so long my vision blurred. That night, after he went to sleep, I burned the picture in the kitchen sink. Watched the paper curl into black ribbons, trying not to cry. But I did cry. I cried hard. The next morning, I packed us both lunches, combed his hair, and smiled like nothing happened. That's the thing about surviving. It teaches you to wear your wounds like makeup. Neat. Hidden. Invisible unless someone's looking real close. Later that year, Eli came down with pneumonia. It hit fast and fierce. I remember rushing him to the ER in the middle of the night, whispering prayers I hadn't said in years. I thought I might lose him. And the worst part wasn't the fear, it was the realization that I had built my whole life around protecting this boy, and still, I couldn't protect him from everything. He recovered. Slowly. And when he finally came home, pale and tired, he looked up at me and said, "You won't leave, right?" like your mama did. I froze. I'd never told him that part. That my mother walked out when I was 13 and never looked back. I wanted to tell him the truth. To tell him I would never leave. But the words stuck in my throat, and all I could say was, "No, baby. I'm staying. I'm yours." That was the moment I realized motherhood isn't just about blood. It's about staying. Even when it's hard. Even when you're haunted. Next time, I'll tell you about the letter I never sent, the one meant for Ray. The one I wrote and burned on a rainy night just to hear the silence it left behind. If this story sits heavy in your heart, you're not alone. Please like, share, and subscribe, not just for me, but for anyone who's ever kept going with a fire in their chest and a lie on their lips. Until next time, stay gentle. I wrote it on a Tuesday. Rain tapping at the windows like it had something to say. Eli was asleep in the other room, curled up with his stuffed dog and a fever that had finally broken. The house smelled like Vicks and laundry. I hadn't slept in 2 days. The pen felt foreign in my hand. I hadn't written anything longer than a grocery list in years. But I sat at the kitchen table, opened a blank page, and wrote Ray at the top like it was a prayer I didn't believe in. I didn't write to forgive him. And I sure as hell didn't write to beg. I wrote because the words had been living inside me for too long, and I needed them out. I told him what he did. In plain language. No metaphors, no poetry. Just facts. I told him how he took what he wanted and left me with the consequences. I told him about the hospital. The nurse who held my hand when I screamed. The silence afterward, heavier than the pain. I told him about Eli. That he had his eyes, but not his darkness. That he laughed in his sleep. That he was kind. And then I told him something I never meant to, that I hated him, yes, but I also feared becoming like him. That sometimes when I got angry, when I felt the rage rise in my throat like smoke, I saw Ray in my reflection. That terrified me more than anything. I folded the letter, sealed it in an envelope, and wrote his name on the front. Then I burned it. Right there on the stovetop, watching the paper blacken and twist until it was nothing but ash. I stood for a long time after, breathing in the bitter air. It didn't bring peace. It didn't undo the past. But it made space. And sometimes space is the only gift you can give yourself. I never told Eli about that letter. He didn't need to know how close his mother came to being swallowed whole. He just needed me standing, smiling, serving spaghetti on Sunday nights and humming while folding towels. That year, 1982, I learned something. Sometimes healing isn't loud. It's not a moment or a breakthrough. It's a quiet act, a single decision. A fire on the stove in the middle of the night, and a woman finally choosing herself. Next time, I'll tell you about the neighbor girl who knocked on our door and taught me how to hope again in the most unexpected way. If you're still with me, thank you. Please like, share, and subscribe. These stories are stitched from pain, but I share them with love for those who need to hear someone made it through. Until next time, stay gentle. She knocked on our door one afternoon in late autumn, just as the wind started changing and the trees began to give up. I remember because Eli was coloring by the window, and I was folding laundry that still smelled of soap and cold air. The knock was soft but certain. When I opened the door, there she stood, no more than 16, maybe 17, wrapped in a faded blue jacket 2 sizes too big, her dark curls pulled back with a broken clip. She didn't ask for money. She asked if we needed help with yard work. Said she'd rake leaves, sweep porches, anything. I hesitated, of course. I always did with strangers. But there was something in her eyes, tired, yes, but not defeated. She reminded me of myself at that age, hungry but proud. Her name was Nina. I gave her a rake and told her she could do the front yard if she wanted. She worked in silence, steady and focused. Eli kept peeking through the window, curious. After an hour, I brought her a sandwich and a glass of lemonade. She took it like it was sacred. Over the next few weeks, she kept coming back. Sometimes to rake. Sometimes to walk with Eli to the corner store. sometimes just to sit on the steps with me while the sun dipped low. She never said much about her life, but I noticed the bruises, old ones, hidden beneath sleeves and shadows. I didn't press. I knew that kind of silence. Knew what it cost. One day, I found a small bundle tucked behind the back shed, a backpack, a toothbrush, a few shirts balled together. She was sleeping out there when no one took her in. My heart cracked open. I waited for her the next morning and asked if she wanted to stay. Not forever, just until she found somewhere better. She nodded without a word. That winter, I added an old cot to Eli's room and gave her my coat. She helped me clean houses, watched Eli when I worked night shifts. She was never a burden. She was a blessing we didn't expect, a quiet stitch in the tear of our little life. And somehow, in caring for her, something inside me softened. I stopped flinching so much, laughed more. I even started writing again, poems in the margins of grocery lists, notes to myself on napkins. Nina brought something into that house I hadn't felt in years. Hope. She stayed with us for 8 months. Then one morning, she was gone. Left a note on the cot. You helped me believe good still exists. Thank you for the porch light. I never saw her again. Next time, I'll tell you about the moment Eli asked me where his last name came from and the lie I chose instead of the truth. If you're listening and this story finds you at the right time, please like, share, and subscribe. Sometimes all it takes is a knock on the door to change everything. Until next time, stay gentle. It was just a school form. A simple piece of paper that needed a signature. Emergency contacts. Medical info. And there it was, halfway down the page, printed in clean black ink like it didn't hold the weight of my whole life. Father's name. Eli was 9. Smart. Observant. The kind of boy who read cereal boxes all the way through, then asked what half the ingredients meant. He brought the form to me with his pencil already in hand. Do I put Dad's name here? He asked. What was it again? I froze. My mouth opened, but nothing came out. I'd told him the story a few times over the years, the one I crafted with care. That his father had been kind, quiet, a carpenter. That he died in a car crash on a rainy night before Eli was born. No details. Just softness. I didn't even give him a name. But that day, I saw in Eli's eyes that it wasn't enough anymore. So I did what I had to. I made one up. Daniel Morgan, I said. That was his name. Eli repeated it under his breath, like he was tasting it. Then he wrote it down, proud, as if a missing piece had finally snapped into place. I watched him and felt something twist inside me. Not guilt, exactly, something older. Grief, maybe? Or shame. Or both. That name became part of our story after that. He'd mention my dad, Daniel, to teachers, to friends. He drew him in stick figure crayon portraits with a hammer in his hand and a big smile on his face. I played along. I added little details when he asked a favorite color, a song he liked. I built a ghost and gave it a history. Because what was the alternative? Tell my son his father was a violent man who never loved him? That he was born from fear, not tenderness? No. No child deserves to carry that. And yet, every time Eli said that name, something in me ached. Like he was calling to a man who never existed, while the one who did was still hiding in the shadows of my past, whispering things I didn't dare speak aloud. But I never told him the truth. Because love, real love, sometimes means bearing the ugliness alone so someone else can live in the light. Next time, I'll tell you about the Sunday Eli didn't come home on time and the panic that opened old wounds I thought I had buried. If this story speaks to something buried in you too, please like, share, and subscribe. These words cost something, but your presence makes it worth it. Until next time, stay gentle. He was supposed to be home by 5. That was always the rule. Back before cell phones, before tracking apps and constant contact, we trusted clocks and the sound of footsteps on the porch. But 5 came, then 5:30, then 6, and the street stayed quiet. I called his friend's house. No answer. Walked up and down the block twice, pretending I wasn't searching with panic in my chest. By 6:15, I was shaking. My hands couldn't hold the phone steady. I remember dialing the police, then hanging up before it rang through. What would I say? That my son was 13 minutes late and my whole body thought he'd been taken? Because that's where my mind went. Not to the park, not to the corner store, but to dark basements and locked doors. Because that's what I had known. Because my past doesn't sit politely behind me, it rides my shoulders, heavy and watchful. By 6:30, I was barefoot in the driveway. Hair unbrushed, apron still on. I must have looked mad to the neighbors. I didn't care. I kept calling his name, voice cracking. I thought I might collapse. Then, finally, I saw him. Walking down the sidewalk like nothing was wrong, slurping the last of a soda, basketball under one arm. He saw my face and slowed. I lost track of time, he said, sheepish. We were just playing. I couldn't speak. I just pulled him into my arms and held him too tight. He laughed, embarrassed, but let me. I whispered, "Don't ever do that again." And he said, "Okay, Mom," like it was no big thing. But it was. That night, I lay awake listening to him breathe. I remembered a different breath, my own, shallow and trembling, in a locked room when I was his age. And I realized something that split me in two. No matter how far I'd come, my body still thought the world was dangerous. And for girls like me, it had been. The truth is, motherhood doesn't erase trauma. It buries it under new fears, new loves. But sometimes it still rises. Next time, I'll tell you about the time I saw Ray again, decades later, in a place I never expected. And what I did. If you've ever felt that fear for someone you love, the kind that lives in your ribs, you're not alone. Like, share, and subscribe if these stories help you feel seen. Until next time, stay gentle. It was a Wednesday. A hot one. I was in the freezer aisle, deciding between green beans or peas, when I felt the air shift behind me like the temperature dropped, but only for me. I turned, and there he was. Ray, 30 years older, thinner, slower, but it was him. Same eyes, same mouth, the mouth that had told me to be quiet, to keep still, to lie. The man whose name I never spoke out loud, even in my sleep. He was pushing a cart with a bag of dog food and a 6-pack of beer. He didn't see me at first. Just kept walking, head down. But I saw enough. I saw his hands. I saw the slight limp in his step. I saw that he still existed, still walked this earth like nothing had ever happened. My breath caught. My knees locked. And for one long second, I was 17 again, trapped in that basement, stomach tight with fear and saltines. Then he looked up. His eyes passed right over me. Didn't pause. Didn't widen. If he recognized me, he didn't show it. Just kept walking like I was a stranger. But I wasn't. I followed him. Not sure why. Just enough to watch where he went. He bought his groceries. Paid in cash. Said thank you to the clerk. Like a normal man. Like a man with no past. I stood in the parking lot as he drove away in a rusted blue pickup. My hands were shaking, and I didn't notice until I dropped the bag of peas onto the pavement. They burst open, rolled everywhere. I stood there with frozen green orbs at my feet, and I cried. Not because I saw him, but because I hadn't screamed. Because part of me, deep down, still thought I had to stay silent. That night, I didn't tell Eli. I didn't tell anyone. I went home, put dinner on the table, and folded towels while they were still warm. Some ghosts don't haunt you. They just shop for dog food and walk past you like nothing ever happened. Next time, I'll tell you about the man I met at the laundromat and how he reminded me that I was still a woman, not just a mother or a survivor. If you're still here, if this story touched something raw in you, please like, share, and subscribe. We keep going not because the past is gone, but because we carry it and still choose to live. Until next time, stay gentle. I met him at the laundromat. Not in any grand way. No swelling music. No slow-motion glances. Just me, clutching a pile of wet towels, staring at a row of broken dryers, and feeling my back ache in 3 different places. He saw me struggling and offered a quarter. That was it. "I think this one still works," he said, nodding to the far end. I looked at him, tall, gray at the temples, wearing a shirt that said Monroe Plumbing. His hands were rough. Not cruel. Just worked. I took the quarter. His name was Walter. I learned that a few loads later. He came every Wednesday after his shift. I started showing up on Wednesdays too. Not for him, I told myself, just for the quiet. But the truth was, I liked the way he spoke. Slow. Measured. Like nothing needed to be rushed. He talked about his grown daughter. His dead wife. The way his tomato plants kept dying no matter what he did. He never asked about my life. Just listened when I offered pieces of it. I told him about Eli. About my job. About the neighbor's dog that barked at shadows. One day, I said something funny without meaning to, and he laughed. Really laughed. The sound startled me. Not because it was loud, but because it had been so long since someone found joy in something I said. I went home that night and caught my reflection in the hallway mirror. There was a softness around my eyes I didn't recognize. A looseness in my shoulders. I touched my face, like I was checking if it was really me. Walter and I never dated. Never kissed. Never crossed a line. But for 3 years, we folded laundry side by side. Sometimes that's intimacy, too, sharing the quiet, sharing the weight of warm clothes and long afternoons. He reminded me I was still here, that I still had skin, that I still had more to offer the world than silence and survival. He moved away in '91. Left a note inside a dryer with a packet of tomato seeds. "Thank you," it said, "for the company. Next time, I'll tell you about the storm that almost took our roof and how it forced me to ask for help, something I'd avoided for too long." If you're finding pieces of yourself in these stories, like, share, and subscribe. It keeps this little circle of light glowing for all of us. Until next time, stay gentle. The storm came in hard that summer. Thunder like gunshots. Wind that screamed through the trees and slammed shutters I didn't know were loose. Eli was 15 by then, tall, lean, already pulling away the way teenagers do, but still home when it mattered. We were eating dinner when the lights flickered. Then the ceiling made a sound I'll never forget, a long, groaning sigh, like it had finally given up. The leak started right over the kitchen table. We ran for buckets. Towels. Anything to catch the drip that became a pour. I tried to stay calm. Told Eli it was fine, just water. But inside, I was spiraling. I knew what repairs cost. I knew I couldn't afford even half of it. My savings were scraps. My job barely covered groceries and school shoes. And still, I didn't ask for help. I didn't call the landlord. Didn't reach out to friends. I patched what I could with duct tape and prayer, told myself it would hold until next paycheck. That's how I'd survived everything else, grit my teeth and keep going. But Eli, he had other ideas. He came home one afternoon with a man from church. Mr. Bowers. Retired, kind, the type of man who always smelled like sawdust. He offered to come by and have a look. I wanted to say no. I didn't want pity. But Eli stood behind him, arms crossed, like a boy who had made a decision. So I said yes. And just like that, help came. Mr. Bowers showed up with shingles and tar and 3 other men who climbed onto that roof like it was their mission. They worked through the weekend. They never asked for a cent, said it was just neighbors doing what neighbors ought to. I cried behind the shed where no one could see me. Because sometimes the hardest thing for a woman like me, a woman who'd spent her whole life hiding wounds and faking strength, is not surviving. It's receiving. Eli never said a word about it. Just kept eating his cereal under the patched roof like it had always been that way. That storm taught me something. Survival built my walls. But love, real love, lets the roof leak just long enough for someone else to step in. Next time, I'll tell you about the letter that came in the spring with handwriting I hadn't seen in decades. And the panic that came with it. If these stories are giving you anything, memory, meaning, maybe just company, like, share, and subscribe. I promise it keeps me going too. Until next time, stay gentle. It came on a Wednesday, tucked between a gas bill and a grocery flyer. No return address. Just my name, Margaret Lee, written in the same crooked script I used to see on lined notebook paper in 1974. Ray. I knew it before I even opened it. My stomach turned before my fingers did. It wasn't long. Just 4 lines. Maggie, I don't expect you to forgive me. I just wanted you to know I still think about you. I think about him too. That was it. No apology. No explanation. Just proof that he still existed. That he remembered. That the life I had tried to keep in pieces, my past in one box, my present in another, had never stayed separate. I sat at the kitchen table for over an hour, holding that letter like it might burn through my skin. Eli was at school. I had the house to myself. And yet I felt watched. Exposed. How did he find me? Why now? What did he want? But deeper than that was another question, one I hated myself for even thinking. Was he telling the truth? Did he think about Eli? I had never once told Ray that I kept the baby. I'd run before I started showing. Changed states. Changed names. He shouldn't have known anything. Unless someone else had told him. Or unless he guessed. And guessed right. I didn't sleep that night. I kept the letter in the drawer next to my bed, tucked under an old Bible I hadn't opened in years. I didn't respond. I never would. But I didn't throw it away either. Because part of me needed proof, physical proof, that I hadn't imagined it. That he had haunted me, not the other way around. And maybe I wanted to keep that warning close. Like a loaded gun on the nightstand. Next time, I'll tell you what happened the night Eli asked me why I never dated. And how close I came to telling him the truth. If this story is touching your memory, your sorrow, or your silence, please like, share, and subscribe. It's how we remind each other we're not alone. Until next time, stay gentle. He was 17. We were washing dishes together, side by side, like we'd done 1,000 times. I dried, he scrubbed. The radio was playing something low, soft guitar, maybe James Taylor. It was quiet, comfortable. Then, out of nowhere, he asked it. Why didn't you ever date anyone? I dropped the dish towel. He didn't look at me, just kept scrubbing, like it was a casual question, like it hadn't just cracked open a sealed vault in the middle of my chest. I tried to laugh it off. Said something like, "Oh, I had you, I didn't need the trouble." But he didn't buy it. He turned to face me, water still dripping from his hands. His eyes, so much like mine, but softer, held something serious. I just mean, you were always alone, Mom. I don't remember anyone. Not even once. I stood there, towel in hand, and realized I had spent so many years building a fortress around the truth that I had forgotten one day he might knock on the door. What could I say? That I didn't date because the only man who ever touched me taught me that touch could be a weapon? That I didn't trust kindness because I had once been fooled by it? That I'd spent years confusing safety with silence? I wanted to tell him everything. In that moment, I really did. He was old enough. Good enough. He could have handled it. But I didn't. Instead, I said, sometimes, when you've been hurt, love feels like a risk you can't afford. He didn't press. Just nodded, quiet. Then turned back to the sink. But that night, I watched him differently. Realized how little he really knew. How much I'd hidden. And how much I still wasn't ready to say. Because I didn't want him to see the world through my scars. I wanted him to believe in love. Next time, I'll tell you about the day I found out Eli was going to be a father and the fear that came with that joy. If you're walking through your own silence, if you've ever answered a big question with a small one just to survive, please like, share, and subscribe. You're not alone. Until next time, stay gentle. He told me on a Sunday. We were sitting in the booth at Jerry's Diner, same place we'd gone since he was little. He always got pancakes, even as an adult. Said they tasted like childhood. He kept fidgeting with the syrup bottle. wouldn't meet my eye. That's when I knew something was coming. Then he said it, just like this, "Mom, I think I'm gonna be a dad." For a second, the whole room blurred. Not because I was upset, but because my body remembered something before my brain caught up. It remembered me at 14. The cold linoleum of a clinic floor. The way my hands shook. The weight of knowing a life had started inside me that no one would celebrate. But this time, it was different. Eli wasn't afraid. He was nervous, sure, but excited. The girl, her name was Marissa, was sweet. Steady. They were ready, or as ready as any young couple could be. I smiled. I congratulated him. I reached across the table and held his hand. But when I got home, I sat in the dark on the edge of my bed and cried. Not because he was too young. Not because I doubted him. But because the child I had once carried in secret was about to become a father in the open. And I had to ask myself a question I had buried for decades. Did he deserve to know the truth? About how he came into this world. About what I endured. About who his father really was. I didn't answer it then. I didn't answer it for a long time. Instead, I knit a blanket. Pale yellow. Soft. I said it was for the baby, and it was. But maybe it was also for the girl I used to be. The one who never got a baby shower. The one who never heard the words, "You're going to be okay." Next time, I'll tell you about holding my first grandchild and the name that almost broke me. If this chapter stirred something in you, joy, pain, memory, please like, share, and subscribe. You never know who might need to hear this next. Until next time, stay gentle. She was born in spring. April. The kind of morning where everything smells like wet dirt and hope. I held her just minutes after she arrived, still pink, still scrunched up, her cry like a question nobody had answered yet. She was so small. And so alive. I couldn't stop staring. Marissa was glowing. Tired, but glowing. Eli was pacing, trying to act calm. Then he leaned in and said, "We picked a name." I smiled. "Let's hear it." He said it gently, almost shyly. Like he was afraid I wouldn't like it. "Rachel." And just like that, the world tilted. Rachel. I hadn't heard that name in over 30 years. But it used to belong to a girl I knew before it all happened, a friend from school, back when I was still Margaret with bright socks and notebooks full of poems. Rachel had been the first person I told about the pregnancy. About Ray. And she'd done nothing. Just looked at me with wide eyes and said, "Maybe don't tell anyone else." That was the last real conversation we had. And now, here I was, cradling my granddaughter with that same name on her hospital bracelet. Eli didn't know, of course. How could he? It was just a name to him. Beautiful, soft, biblical. He said Marissa liked the way it sounded, gentle but strong. I smiled. Said it was perfect. And then, later, in the quiet of my own room, I said the name again. Out loud. Like I was exorcising it. Rachel. Sometimes, the past doesn't return as a ghost. Sometimes it comes back wrapped in a pink blanket with tiny fingers and a new middle name, and you have to choose whether to flinch or let love win. I chose love. Next time, I'll tell you about when Eli asked to see his birth certificate, and the line he didn't know was a lie. If this story resonates, if you've ever felt the past circling back when you least expected it, like, share, and subscribe. Your listening gives me courage. Until next time, stay gentle. He found it while cleaning out the drawer in the hallway. The one stuffed with old batteries and manuals for appliances we didn't own anymore. "Hey, Mom," he called. "Why is my birth certificate in here?" I froze. He walked into the kitchen holding it like it was nothing. A piece of paper. A curiosity. Not a landmine. I took it from him too quickly. He noticed. His brows drew in. "I never really looked at this before," he said. "It says, Father, unknown." And there it was. The truth I had wrapped in silence for decades, now staring back at both of us in 12-point font. I told him it was a clerical thing. That I had been young, scared, and alone. That I didn't put anything down because I didn't know if I was allowed to. That was true. But it wasn't the whole truth. He sat down, arms crossed. You really don't know who he was? I looked him in the eye and said the only words I could say without unraveling everything. I knew who you were. That was enough. He nodded. Slowly. But something in him changed after that. A flicker. A distance. He didn't push, not then, but I could feel him pulling back. Just slightly. The way people do when they realize a story they thought was solid has hollow spaces in it. Later that night, I sat at the kitchen table with the birth certificate beside me. Father, unknown. Not a mistake. A choice. I chose that line. I chose silence. Not because I was ashamed, but because I was afraid that if I put his name on that paper, it would tether Eli to a man who only gave him pain by existing. Some truths protect. Some truths poison. I couldn't take the risk. Next time, I'll tell you about the phone call I got that changed everything. And how it made me rethink silence, just for a moment. If this story touched something in you, some secret, some scar, like, share, and subscribe. The truth is heavy. It helps to carry it together. Until next time, stay gentle. It came late. After 10. The hour when bad news finds you. I almost didn't answer. The number was unfamiliar. Area code from another state, a state I hadn't spoken of in decades. But something in me picked up. A woman's voice. Soft. Careful. Like she already knew the name she was about to say would wreck me. Is this Margaret Lee? I almost said no. Then, I'm sorry to bother you. I'm calling about Raymond Carter. I didn't speak. Couldn't. My mouth stopped working. She went on. He passed last week. Heart failure. He'd been living in a veteran's home outside Tallahassee. Your name was listed in an old notebook he kept. We thought maybe you'd want to know. That was it. That was all. No obituary. No funeral to attend. No mention of the boy I'd raised alone. Just a death floating down the phone line like an old leaf. I thanked her, hung up, and stared at the kitchen wall until the clock struck midnight. Raymond Carter was dead. The boy who'd stolen everything from me before I even had a voice to fight back, gone. Just like that. No reckoning. No apology. No consequence. Just an empty bed and an old notebook with my name still inside it. And still, I didn't cry. I thought I might. I waited for it. But what came instead was a kind of quiet, like a door had shut somewhere in the house of my memory. I didn't tell Eli. I made tea. I watched the steam rise, and I whispered to myself, it's over. Whatever you owed him, it's paid. Next time, I'll tell you about the day Eli asked to know more. And how close I came, again, to telling him everything. If you're still here, listening, please like, share, and subscribe. It gives strength, it really does. Until next time, stay gentle. It was raining that night. Not a storm. Just one of those steady, tired rains that taps the windows like it's trying to get in. Eli had stayed late after dinner. Marisa and the baby had already gone home, but he lingered, fiddling with the sugar spoon like he used to do when he was little and nervous. Then he looked up and said it. Tell me the truth, Mom. Just like that. No build-up. No warning. He didn't say what truth. He didn't have to. I know you've kept something from me, he said. And I get it, I do. But I'm not a kid anymore. And I think I deserve to know where I come from. He wasn't angry. That made it worse. Because his voice was kind. Because he still trusted me. Because I had lied to him, not to deceive him, but to protect the pieces of him I had built so carefully. The way a mother protects the soft spot on a newborn's head. I opened my mouth, then closed it, then opened it again. And what I said was this, Eli, your father was someone I knew when I was very young. Too young. And he wasn't kind to me. I don't use his name because he doesn't deserve it. Not next to yours. He stared at me. silent, waiting. I went on. I chose to raise you without his shadow. I chose to make your life your own, not a reaction to someone else's cruelty. If that's a betrayal to you, I'm sorry, but I would do it again. He didn't speak for a long time. Then he reached across the table and covered my hand with his. You did what you had to do, he said. I nodded. But inside me, something cracked. Not from guilt. Not even from grief. But from relief. Because I realized he understood, at least a little. Next time, I'll tell you everything. Everything I never said. The full truth. For you, for him, for anyone who's ever carried silence like armor. If you've made it this far, please like, share, and subscribe. It helps more than I can say. It reminds me I'm not just talking into the dark. Until next time, stay gentle. I was 14. It was summer. Hot, still air. Cicadas loud in the trees. My mother worked nights, and my uncle, my mother's younger brother, had moved in after his divorce. He was 28. He slept on the couch. Drank too much. Smiled too wide. He wasn't a stranger. He was family. And that's the part one need you to hear. It didn't happen in an alley. Or behind a bar. It happened in my own home, with the curtains open and the laundry still warm in the basket. He told me not to tell. That I wouldn't be believed. And he was right. Because when my mother came home and saw me crying, and I told her what happened, she slapped me. Told me to never say his name again in her house. The next week, she took me to the doctor for nausea. I knew by then. I was pregnant. That was 1966. I dropped out of school. I gave birth to Eli in a hospital that didn't ask many questions. On his birth certificate, under father, I wrote unknown. That wasn't a mistake. It was a shield. I left town 6 months later. Never spoke to my mother again. Never told Eli the truth. Not about his father. Not about the life before him. I rebuilt from scraps. I cleaned houses. I kept my head down. I raised a boy with all the love I had in me and none of the hate. That's the part one need you to hear. I didn't lie to protect myself. I lied to give my child a name untainted by horror. I lied to give him the chance to believe in goodness, in men, in family. And now, I'm 73. My hands shake when I do the buttons on my coat. My knees ache in the morning. But my heart, it's quieter now. Because I've spoken the truth. To you. To him. To myself. I don't regret what I kept. I don't regret what I gave. I only hope this truth, now that it's out, can float in the world with less weight than it held in me. So, if you're watching this, maybe on your phone in the dark, maybe in bed, maybe in silence, I want you to know something. You're not alone. You can survive what tried to erase you. And you can love without passing on the pain. If this story gave you strength, if it reminded you that your past doesn't own your future, please like, share, and subscribe. It's not just for the algorithm. It's so I know you're out there. Leave a comment if you feel like it. Tell me where you're from. Tell me what you carry. I'm listening. We all are. Until then, stay gentle.